We are live.
Nice.
What's going on, everybody? Today, as the title shows, we are going to chat about doing double sessions. Should you be doing them? Should you not be doing them? How to effectively do them, or how to not effectively do them. So a lot of people do them when they shouldn't. We'll get into that. As the title says as well, are you getting twice as good by doing twice as many sessions, or just 2 in a day? Maybe you're not doing them every day, but some days. So today we got Roman and Sam, myself and Sam. If you got any questions while you're in the chat, you can drop them in, and we're going to get started off talking about who should be doing double sessions. So,
well, real quick, I might as well share the story I just outlined because maybe there's a tie-in to adding more training volume. So Roman was asking me, because I'm back home for Thanksgiving, what I was doing for training other than running. And I mentioned to him that I have a pair of 80-pound dumbbells here in my hometown at home where I grew up. And I stole those. Not ashamed to say it. I stole them when I was at USC in LA and during my college years. On the practice football field, one of the practice football field, there's like 3 of them. One of them was a turf one. In the very far corner, there was this pair of 80-pound dumbbells that I saw all the time. So we'd go out on the field and practice 3 times a week. And I saw these dumbbells all the time. I'm like, man, whose are those? Why are they just sitting there? And they're 80s. So about a year goes by and they're still there. Nobody's ever touched them. They haven't moved. And then one day I mustered up the gusto and I said, you know what? I'm taking these. So I got my beach cruiser bike that had a rickety basket on the front. And I put the 2 80-pound dumbbells in the basket. And I quickly realized that I can't even ride the bike with that much weight in that horrible basket, very poorly reinforced. So I walk alongside my bike. I'm kind of holding the dumbbells so they don't fall. And I walk about a mile with the bike in the dumbbells. And I get to my apartment. I park my bike. My basket is now bent, but that's okay. It was a necessary casualty. I take the dumbbells out, and then I farmer walk them up, of course, to my apartment because we're not on the first floor. We're on the 3rd floor. And I had 80-pound dumbbells in my apartment until I think the winter. And then when I went home, I brought them home, and I've had them home I've had them over 10 years now at home. So usually when I come home for holidays, I have a quality pair of 80-pound dumbbells that I can do a lot of different movements with. But yeah, I took those from USC and they haven't requested them back since. So as of now, they are mine. And all of my training that preceded that mission that I undertook prepared me. And there were some double sessions in my training prior to that mission. So it must have been all of that extra farmer carries that I was doing that gave me the strength I needed to carry those dumbbells as far as I did. Because there was a lot of farmer walking with those things to get from the field to my bike, from parking the bike up to the room. So good times.
That was your NIL deal. That's what you got for performing for them.
Yes, that was everybody else is getting $100,000 in cars and watches, and I took 80-pound dumbbells, and I think I fared better than everyone else.
True. Yeah.
So
you took lessons with you, and you're still reaping the benefits of them.
Yes, I will. Yes, and I love that they're 80s because there's no warm up weight. It's like you go right to the 80. It's like I gotta lift the 80 if I'm gonna do some snatches or some bench presses, some rows. There's no build up sets. You just gotta start going.
So when you just told me that, I was thinking, since you drove from Arizona to California, I was assuming you had them at your home in Arizona. And I was assuming that you just chose to bring only the 80s with you. And I was just thinking, like, dang, dude, I mean, that's what you chose. That's pretty stout. And then you said 80-pound kettlebell. And I was like, man, you just really like the 80s. Like,
yeah, no, they're all here. I didn't, but I got a good supply at home in Arizona, some heavy dumbbells, kettlebells, but yeah, good old 80s.
Nice. All right. Well, leading into that, leading into now the the main topic. Most people, clients of mine, clients of yours, I'm sure, people just asking like, hey, should I do double sessions? Or, hey, I don't have work over the break, or I'm a teacher and now I have summer. Should I be doing double sessions? I'm a teenager. I got summer. Like I'm ready. I'm ready. I need to train twice a week now. I can get all of these sessions in, or maybe your normal job allows you to, and you want to. And we get that question a lot. And some people may be ready, some people maybe not. How briefly before we get too deep into it, what do you think initially when a client asks you that, or like, hey, I want to train twice a day, like start putting the sessions in?
Yeah. Well, the first thing that comes to mind is we want to identify why would we want to add more training volume in a single day? What's besides doing more training, why would we want to do that? And more often than not, it needs to connect to the competitive layout format that you're going to have to eventually do when you do compete. The reason I say that, most competitions, especially if we're focusing on CrossFit, you're going to have to do multiple events in a day. So you're going to have to do event 1 at 8 a.m., event 2 at noon, and event 3 at 4 o'clock. So there's a rhythm with energy, hormones, fueling that has to be developed so you can do that optimally, especially if you plan to compete, a couple times a year for many years in a row. And ironically, that's probably one of the variables that greatly influences the outcome in a competition is how well somebody is prepared for the multi-day event over multiple days that the competition presents to competitors. Because if you go to a competition, you just watch and you see the people who haven't built enough training volume or haven't practiced that rhythm, they just lose energy and the ability to work each day. And it's like this precipitous drop. Whereas those that have the volume built and they've practiced it, you can see that they can maintain energy energy resources longer than those other people. So in training, that would be one of the reasons why you would start adding double sessions, is to better prepare you for that, which might come down the road, but eventually you have to be doing multi sessions. And then of course, if you zoom out, you look at the games where you're doing 4, sometimes 5 events in one day, but probably 3 to 4 is a safer bet over multiple days. Then that of course has to be practiced and developed and refined so that when you actually go compete, your system's ready for that. So that's when we think about double sessions. That would be one of the main reasons we're implementing them, is to get people's systems ready for multi-day competitions. The other reason, which would be one that's used in other sports, is building training volume. So if you need to build a lot of volume for your sport, think of endurance sports, then this is a great way of accumulating more, is by, of course, adding sessions in the week. So, or sessions in the day, which increases the total volume in the week.
Okay, so you're saying, so someone out there right now might not be doing double sessions and not really think they need to, and they're doing really well in their training. So, you're saying eventually, as you transition into becoming a better athlete or wanting to improve in the sport, it's going to be necessary as a part of, improving, to do double sessions, whether or not you think you need them or not. It's going to be valuable to you, to start doing them.
Yes. Now, I think this is a good segue into my glass of water analogy that I like to use. So, for those watching, I have a cup in my hand of water. Every day, we start the day with a full, well, actually, the better way of explaining it would be, the full glass that's the best way. You can do either way, but I think it's more illustrative if I go full glass. So you start the day with a full glass of water, and that represents the totality of your resources, your energy for the day. Now, as you go through your day, you're drinking water from that cup. You're losing water. So think of your work, relationship stress, food stress, commuting, lack of sleep, training, all of these little things that pull energy from your system. They're draining your cup of water. Training, of course, is a huge drawer of the water from your cup. So if we're going to add volume to the day or to the week, we have to assume that there's enough water available for all the other things going on. So the reason I say that, most people don't think about adding more training volume as a drawer of more energy from them in the day, and they don't accommodate for that with more rest, better fueling, more hydration, less stress from other things. So they keep everything the same, but they pull more energy from themselves. And that's not good, because what happens is, as the days and weeks go on, the day is starting with less and less water because you're not recovering enough of it. Because at night, in theory, we would refill the cup all the way to the top again. So yes, you do need to be able to add more volume and more sessions in your training eventually, but it can't be at the expense of your recoverability and your ability to allocate resources really well in the day and in the week. So we have to take stock of, how's your sleep, how's your food, how's your work situation, how's your what does your routine in life look like, and does it support more work, more stress, more, when I say work, I mean more training. If it does, great, then let's add more slowly, which we'll get into. But if it's not in the cards, then that's the last thing you want to do, is try to add in more training, because then you're just going to be burning the candle at both ends, where you're draining all your water and you're not replenishing it very well either.
Mm-hmm. So you said most of the water in the cup, most of your fuel and energy is taken from training, alluding to that maybe some of the water might be allocated to other resources of your life. So what do you mean by that?
Well, if your job is stressful, causes a lot of emotional stress for whatever reason, that's pulling resources. So that's draining the body of energy. If your sleep quality is poor, so you're not getting enough hours, the quality is low as well, that's going to pull resources. Your food quality. So if your diet has more inflammatory foods or more processed foods, that's going to cause more systemic stress in your digestive system, which is going to make your system have to work harder, which will influence, of course, hormones, and also just how your body feels in general. So if you have to commute a long distance to work and it's a tough commute, that's going to influence energy and resources. There's just all these little things people don't think about, lack of hydration, that are pulling resources from the body. And like you said, training's the biggest one, but people forget about these little things that add up, and then, actually make training less beneficial, less impactful, because you just don't have what's required to get the most out of it. And it's not a surprise that the top athletes, they spend most of the day training, and then if they do any work, it's not a lot, and then everything else is very low stress. I remember one time hearing Usain Bolt used to go do his track sessions, and then he'd come back and he'd play like video games for like 4 hours, and then he'd go do some soft tissue work and some training, like weight training, and then come back and like watch movies and play video games. Like that's, that's what the pinnacle of any sport, that's what they're doing. It's like all the resources go towards the actual sport. Everything else goes towards repairing and recovering, so that they can rinse and repeat that.
Yeah. Yeah. So you might, and that's from like an athlete's perspective we're talking to, but there might be coaches out there as well, looking at a training week of one of their clients and seeing like, oh, everything's going well. As soon as I added some extra sessions, now it's not going well, but it doesn't make sense because their training metrics look good on most of the time. Most of the time they're eating well, they're sleeping well from what they're reporting, but maybe a coach out there isn't taking account for, like, this person has a boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, spouse, and not even that it's their relationship's going bad, but possibly it just takes effort to, they're spending time with them, or now they're not spending as much time with them. Their job doesn't seem like it's stressful, but it's, they work remotely and they work at home, but they don't realize the the small stressors that are adding up over a week. And then on the weekend they have, they want to, communicate and have good times with friends, family. So a lot of the times it's easy to overlook something like that, and from a coach or from an athlete's perspective, and just not understand why. And it seems like there's no answer to, why my knee is always hurting or why I'm not progressing as much as I wanted to. Even when you think the metrics are in place physically, there might not be, it might not be adding up. And then, which leads to another question as well, or another thought is, someone might be ready to take on the physical toll of training twice a day, but is there a psychological aspect to it? Or have you seen people, add a lot of psychological stress just because, they're training twice a day and now an extra hour or two? I mean, realistically, if you're training even for 45 minutes, it's a lot of prep time, commute and whatnot. So do you think there's like a psychological barrier as well, or something that could cause issues to the training psychologically and not just physically?
Another way we could look at it, that's getting to your question, is it's all about trade-offs. And I really learned this idea in economics, because almost everything we do is about trade-offs. So you want one thing, you're giving up another thing. It's always, that's one way you can look at almost any decision you make in life. It's like, what are the trade-offs on the table? What am I gaining versus what am I losing? So with training, it's the same thing, where if I am adding volume, I'm adding more work that I have to do in a day. There's a trade-off, and the trade-off is I'm losing time and resources that would be used otherwise. So if there was availability for that, then we could make an argument it's a good trade-off given what the goal is. If it's hard to justify that trade-off, like I don't know if I have enough resources available, I don't know if I can train and exert that much energy in the day and replenish it for the next day, then it's probably not a good trade-off. And that kind of leads into, you're better off, if we were to zoom out, you're better off doing less volume and make the volume great and progress week over week, month over month, year over year, than trying to fit in more volume. And so that's because that happened to me I'd say the first time when I first started trying to compete and take my training a lot more seriously. I had the time and energy available to do double sessions because I just didn't have as much responsibility. So I'm training a lot and I'm getting better. But as I start coaching more, as I started taking classes for PT school, like my things on my plate started to pile up. The quality of my training started to drop because I couldn't handle the volume, given now I had more responsibilities, more time I had to devote to other things. And so what ended up happening is I got an injury twice, and my motivation started to drop for training because I wasn't recovering well. It was a drag to try to train because my body just wasn't recovering enough. So inevitably, we cut the volume back, do single sessions. A couple months go by, I'm feeling great. I PR my clean and jerk, like I'm recovering well. I feel fit, and so I cut it back almost in half, but I was making a lot more progress, and that's because, again, trade-offs. It was more valuable for me to be pushing coaching and schoolwork than just solely focusing on training at that time. And so the best solution was pull back some of the volume, get better quality out of my training, and then that allowed me to stack really good months over a long period of time. And I would say by the end of that period was probably where the fittest I was, with less volume than I had been doing probably a year prior. So it's important to think about the trade-offs and ensure that you have what's required to make a good trade-off with respect to volume and the goals you have. So hopefully that gets to your question a little bit. If there's more we want to open up there, we can.
Yeah. And I was kind of thinking as well, more on the side of like, are you ready to really put in hard effort twice a day and understand like the trade-off of the time you're losing? Like some people just don't understand, like it's not just you're in the gym an extra, let's just say 90 minutes. So that means you're in the same space longer now. You're, listening to music or, having the stressors of those kind of things. You're, around some of the same people. So I don't want to say monotonous, but like, that can take a toll on you. Like you're investing more of your life now into the gym, which most of these people understand that that's what they're doing. They're training for competition, but you just have to you just have to understand like you're trying to level up, so you're committing more now. So that might just take a toll on you, and you just have to be willing to do that. We got a couple questions in here.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, and then we can hit on those.
What would you say, from Will, what would you say the prerequisites are before adding a second session in? Having enough time, fueling properly, etc. We kind of hit on this a little bit. You got anything quick?
So I think I'm gonna zoom out a little, and it'll answer this question. So yes, the short answer would be yes. You need to have enough time, which comes back to the trade-off idea. Like, can you give up time in your day to train more, and it won't cost you in a way that, if compounded, would be a problem in 3-6 months, a year. So you do need time. Of course, you need fueling. So if you're going to expend more energy in the day, you're going to have to eat more. Do you have enough time to eat more? And then 3, you have to sleep more. So I usually tell clients who are not a master's athlete, who are younger, that if we are going to start adding in doubles, you need to have at least 9 hours set aside to be in bed. Does that mean you're going to sleep all 9? Not necessarily, but you need to have 9 hours set aside as a minimum to give your system enough time to rest and recover from all of that work. I say not with masters, because as we get older, the sleep requirements are going to change a little bit, but also the volume requirements change too, which Sherry asked that question. So I'll get to that in a moment. So to Will's point, you need those things. You need the time to train, you need the time to eat more, you need the time to sleep more. So that's that. I think and you mentioned this right before we brought up the question, was the introduction of the second session. How do we go about doing that in a way that maximizes the benefit and value for the athlete and client? Because I've done this a ton of times where you do too much too fast, and it's overwhelming, and they don't adapt well, and it's too much. So we need to go nice and slow, and there's a nice way in which we can progress this, and I have this written down in my notes. So the first step is you want to make the sessions shorter and less intense and cyclical based, because the goal at first isn't to get a big adaptation. It's just to get the body used to a new rhythm. That's step one. Step one is the body has to learn a new rhythm with energy, with fueling, with having a cortisol spike twice in a day and learning how to come down from that, etc. Like that's step one. Step two is now you start increasing the volume. So you start doing a little bit more volume in that session. You're still keeping intensity somewhat low, and you're still biasing it cyclically. So again, we're building the rhythm, and now we're starting to build aerobic volume, because this is going to support all of the training. And then after a period of time, and now we're going to start subtly increasing the intensity. And there's lots of ways in which you can do this, but the bulk of it will still be easier. And then after a bit of time, now we start increasing the presence of more dynamic work. So think of thrusters, muscle ups, handstand walking, burpee, box jump overs, whatever it might be. So there's this very slow, gradual process of ramping it up until it becomes its own robust session, where it's like you look on paper, it's like those are 2 big sessions. And so I think people they jump those steps too quickly. How long should it take? It could be 3 months at stage 1, and 3 months at 2, 3 at 4, and 3 at 4. I mean, it could be a whole year before you're actually doing true dynamic work in a second session, and you're expressing it well, and you're recovering well from it. But I think that would be the mentality you're wanting to take, which is like low and slow, because that's what's going to give them time to really adapt and cement those changes. And now the follow-up question would, of course, be how how do you know when it's time to change, or how do you know when it's time to start going to the next step? Well, this is where you would use KPIs, or you'd use metrics to check in and get a read on how's their system doing. So that could be with a 1RM snatch, that could be a max unbroken strict handstand push-up set, that could be a 10-second max wattage on the bike. It depends what metrics you want to use with the client that are important metrics to be tracking with them. And if those are trending up, then you could make a justified statement that they're adapting positively given the training and what we're doing, and that the additional training volume isn't hindering them in their recovery.
I thought that was elegantly answered. So yeah, it's deeper than just do you have the time? And every athlete's going to be different. Like you said, some might be doing super easy work, walks around the world, easy bike, maybe even, there's not much lighter than that, but, mobility worked in, movement worked into that. And they might be doing that for a while just to get into rhythm, which is kind of the basis of it. It's super important to understand, like, your body just needs to know I'm using energy right now, taking a break and using energy again later. But yeah, how do you think, question from Sherry, I think I'm pronouncing, you said Sherry?
Yep. Yeah, Sherry.
Yeah, Sherry. How is it different for masters athletes? So we kind of just spoke maybe about, someone between 18 and 30. As you start to get older, it might change a little bit, and the sport changes a little bit, especially when you get towards 40 plus, 50 plus. So is it largely different when you look at it, or is it the principles remain the same and you're just tweaking for, how the sport differs?
Yeah, great question by Sherry, who's a client of mine. Thanks, Sherry. Principles are the same, but the human is very different. So the number one rule I have with masters athletes, and I tell nearly all, I don't want to say all of them because there might be one I haven't mentioned this to, and then if they said it, they'd be like, "You've never told me that." So I'm going to hedge myself and say nearly all of my masters athletes, I tell them that the number one priority for us with their training is to keep them healthy, because that's the linchpin for masters athletes. They usually try to train similar to a younger athlete, and they don't move and recover as fast as them, and they inevitably get injured, or something comes up that really holds them back. So that's like the guiding light for me with their programs is in training is I need to keep them healthy within the confines of what the sport demands of them at the level they're at. So that's number one. And number two is they need to be enjoying themselves. When you get over 40, you need to be enjoying this process more than when you're in your 20s or 30s, because you're closer to the end than you are the beginning, and you don't want to be wasting time in the gym working on something and like losing your mind over it, because there could be things you could be doing with your time that are much better spent, whether it's with your family or your friends. So I always want to make sure that they're enjoying themselves and they're enjoying the process. And if they're not, then we need to have a conversation on how can we bring more joy into this, or do we need to change the goals? Because this needs to be this needs to add value to your life, especially more so at this stage. It does when you're young too, but it's different when you're young. Like you're going after something, you're really challenging, you're stretching yourself, you're going on your quest, and it's good. You're going to learn a lot, even if you fail. As you get older, and you have more wisdom at that point too. So it's easier for you to go like, yeah, let me really think about this and make sure it really aligns with what I care about and how I want to spend my time, because it takes a lot of time. Having said that, masters, of course, are not going to recover as fast. And the number one priority is they need to stay healthy. So when we think about volume, we want to really think about that minimum effective dose. What's the minimum amount they can do that will get the adaptations we need and allow them to keep getting better without pushing them too much? That's how I also think about it. So doubles, I'm a lot more hesitant with masters athletes with that in mind, but also because most of them do work or have more responsibilities in a family. So they don't have as much extra time to train more. So most of the time they don't have the time for the doubles. For those that do, I'm going to follow the same kind of principle that I outlined previously around those 4 steps, where we start with maybe once or twice a week. We add a second session in, which is what I did with Sherry when we started adding second sessions. We started a few times a week, kept it shorter, more cyclical base, and then we just kind of slowly progressed it as she's been adapting, because she has the time, she has the energy, it aligns with what she wants and what she cares about. So it makes sense for her, but not at the expense of her enjoying herself, staying healthy, and of course getting better. So I'm a lot more, I probably move the progression a lot slower with the masters athletes, because I just know their system won't recover as fast. And I just make sure too, is it necessary for them? Because I have, like, my masters athlete Joe, who came third at the games this past year. He doesn't do double sessions the whole year. He doesn't. He does 5 sessions a week, 50, 48, 49 weeks a year, maybe more than that. The only time he's doing multiple sessions in a day is when we did simulations for the semifinals and then the games. Otherwise, he did singles, and he, came third at the games. So granted, he's 55, but still, the point being, you don't need to be training 15 times a week to reach that level. He's been training for 30 years, so he has this big base of volume built. Not 30 years solely in CrossFit, but he's been lifting weights and being physical for 30 years. So it helps, but it's not the separator for masters athletes like it is for the individuals. The individuals, it is a necessity. You need the volume if you want to reach higher levels. But for masters, you can stay competitive without having to do double sessions every day.
Okay. Yeah, I was writing this down. It leads me into another question or thought. If masters or not, because you just mentioned he only does single sessions 99% of the year. So say someone is doing the single sessions, then we're approaching something like quarterfinals, where we know we're probably going to be hitting 2 sessions a day or 2 hard events, and with a break, because that would be better for most people. Or they're just coming up to a competition. They're doing an off-season local comp. It's going to have 2 sessions, 3 events, 2 or 3 events over a few days. Would, in prep for that, you encourage or try and, make it a priority to set some time? And would it be beneficial for them just to do a few double sessions going into it if they had the time? Or is there a time where that would be detrimental to them as well?
So first question is, yes, it would be. So
use quarterfinals, for example.
Yeah, use quarterfinals. Yeah. And you and I do this similarly. That was tough to say, in our practice, where leading into competition, we have clients do a simulation where we're designing events that replicate what the competition might look like. And you might do that a few times, a few weeks out from the competition. So you're getting practice of it's like a scrimmage. And to your point, you will have to do multiple events over multiple days. So those simulations, I will set them up so they have to practice that. And that's probably the first exposure that Joe, using him as an example, or Sherry, are going to have to do before they actually compete in quarterfinals. So that's when I'm going to expose them to it. You could do it earlier, but I'm just using them as an example, or Joe specifically, where his life and the time he has available in the day is not conducive for him training more, and he just doesn't want to, and he doesn't need to. Now, to your point, is it detrimental? If you're going to prepare for quarterfinals effectively, then ideally the training leading up, you wouldn't have any issues. There wouldn't be any setbacks or anything along those lines where you have to drastically change the training. So if everything's going according to plan, then you would be ready and prepared to then do simulations where it's multiple days, multiple events over multiple days. So it might be detrimental if somebody is like burnt out or overly fatigued, or an injury pops up where more trainings might not be that helpful. So we're making the assumption that everything's going according to plan. And then when it's time to do the simulation, their system's ready to roll. But if something does come up, then that's when, okay, maybe we do need to pull volume back. Because I've done that before where 3 weeks out, somebody's sick, their body hurts, they have no energy, and I just pull all the training out. It's like, don't do anything for a week. And they're, of course, freaking out because they're like, oh no, I'm going to lose all my gains. I'm not going to do well. I shouldn't compete now. And I'm like, you're fine. Just relax, rest, let your body heal. It's not like you just lost all the training you've done for the past 5 years. It's still in the tank.
Yeah.
And then more often than not, they go to the competition, they feel good, they've healed, and they go compete, and they do well. Because usually that's just a sign that the system is like, it's overreaching quite a bit, and it just like too much, and it just needs a little break. So you just pull the volume in for a week. It's tough because the athlete will get very anxious. But you as a coach have to be like confident that this is what we need to do, and you'll be okay. And most time it works out that way.
Yeah. So kind of almost going back to our previous episode where you were discussing if you want to compete in quarterfinals, kind of the requisite to doing that, besides getting top 10 or 25%, is can you perform the training leading up to it?
Yes.
Similarly here, like if you can't perform the double sessions, that may not mean you shouldn't do quarterfinals, but that may mean you need to, as a coach, design the simulation as such, or as an athlete, understand that just jumping into double sessions 2 weeks before quarterfinals might not be the best idea because I'm not ready for the double sessions, and that would be a detriment to my training overall. And then, ramping up for competition doesn't necessarily mean like I'm stepping on the gas pedal with all my training. Like you're ramping up your system to perform the best, where a lot of people think, now I'm going to go build my engine in the next 2 weeks. I'm hitting hard assault bike sprints in the AM and, doing a hard workout, and then I'm doing my lifting. And so the language of it doesn't necessarily mean like you're ramping up training full time, which people get confused with.
Yeah. And on that, a quick little note, I had this discussion with a client recently, and then also with an associate coach in our associate coach program. Because I think one thing that people are still uncertain about, or the consensus is uncertain around, the intensity at which you train, and does that need to be higher or harder or faster most of the year? And what I told him was, this client in particular, I said, if I gave you this specific session that we were talking about, if I gave you this specific session in June, and I also gave it to you in February, and I didn't change any of the language, any of the reps, anything, it was the exact same on paper, you would unconsciously go at it harder in February than you would in June, because you're so much further away from competition. Like where you are in the year relative to when you actually have to compete. And the point of that is, as you get closer to competition, you're unconsciously going to be giving more intensity and effort because you're getting closer to it. And that's across almost every sport. Yes, you will change the prescription and the way you write things to move the athlete towards giving more intensity and getting the dose that you want. But there's this element, this variable you won't account for, which is you will change how you the intention behind the work. So I think that's important, because you almost have to divorce yourself from the idea, do I always have to be working at 100% all the time to be getting better and better at the sport? Which is why I mentioned earlier, with double sessions, it needs to be easy and cyclical and less volume from the start. You just need to build the rhythm. You just need to you just build your system, and over time it'll get a little bit faster, especially as you get closer to competition. So you don't have to change things that much in that sense, or you need to keep things full throttle all the time, all year long, because that's also a recipe for disaster. So it kind of ties into what we're talking about, but I thought it was something that was worth mentioning, because I see that all the time. And I even remember when I was competing, it was the same thing. It was just, it was like I would approach things so much differently. And you could probably say the same as well for yourself. Like I would just change the intention because I knew what was coming and I knew what I needed to start to feel more, which also gives strength to the argument that you can't replicate that all year long because you don't have the benefit of knowing you're going to compete in like 3 to 4 weeks.
Yeah.
So the further away you are, there should be a dramatic change in the intensity and the speed and intention you bring to your training. Yeah. And then the double sessions will also reflect that as well because they're going to complement what you're doing.
Yeah. I was just imagining like in July doing, 10 rounds, 90-second assault bike at 85% and then 10 bar facing burpees. And I would be like, all right, 85%, it's like smooth. Like I feel good. I want to feel good after the burpees. I'm like working on my footwork. I'm just building the volume. Like I'm fast, but every set was the same speed. And like, I'm just, everything around my mind is building. And then if I was to do that in January, my 85% would be on the bike would be, like I would be thinking like, okay, what's 85% of near death? And then like my burpee speed would be, as fast as I could go with basically having close to no, but maybe a small drop off at the very end. And like you said, it's the same session, but nothing changing, using the same language of 85%. And even if you said like make it smooth and quick, you would just you'd be so gassed up knowing like, oh, bar facing burpees are coming, like it's time. Like I need to know, which is maybe it's not a bad thing, that's the nature of it and the nature of a good athlete as well. Understanding when the intent changes a little bit of, I'm building my base right now. I have another session. I have a strength session later. So I want energy for that versus now where it's like, I need to push the threshold to become faster.
Yep. Maybe we'll in the future do an episode. We can elaborate on that a little bit more. But
on intention or the
intention and how that influences training and the way you execute your training, as it also relates to the time of year and what you're doing. Like what are you actually trying? What adaptations are you trying to drive in your training, and how does that influence the intention you need to bring?
Or what
those go ahead.
Or what documentary you just watched? Like what
yeah,
you
definitely
just got hyped up.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so you want to we can move on to maybe common mistakes people are making, like with or do you want to hit on the differences in the sessions a little bit?
Well, I feel as though I think I hit on the difference in sessions with the framework I outlined, which is, to reiterate, step 1, when implementing double sessions or second sessions in a day, you're going to start with making them shorter. They're more cyclical based and they're less intense. What could that look like? 30 minutes easy, 1 minute row, 1 minute plank, 1 minute lunges, 1 minute step ups, 1 minute single unders, 1 minute bike. Mm-hmm. And we call that like around the world. That would be step 1. Because again, you're just trying to build the rhythm. You're not necessarily caring about some very specific adaptation yet. And then 2, you increase the volume of the session while keeping the intensity low and also biasing cyclical. So from 30 minutes, maybe it becomes 45 minutes or an hour. Mm-hmm. Then you start to increase the intensity. But I would do it where, say, 80% of that session is still easy and 20% is tough. So to give you an example, let's say, what did I write here for as an example? I did 30 minutes easy on machines into like 5 sets, 10 cal row, 10 burpee, 10 cal row, rest 90 seconds, 5 sets. So you do 30 minutes easy on the front end, and then you're doing about 7 minutes of tough work on the back end. So front loading work, which of course creates an element of fatigue, which is going to control the intensity of the sets. And then we're also putting it on the back end. So you're pre-fatigued a little bit, and you've already done a good amount of work. So you're going to get a good, let's say, systemic dose of volume accumulation in that manner. And then after we've done that for a bit, now we can start increasing the presence of dynamic movement. So you started muscle ups and burpees, power clean overhead, box forward, cows on the bike, or whatever. So that would be the mistake people make. They start at the end and they do too much of it, and it just they can't recover well from it. Their system's not ready. Because remember, the training, like this always, I always come back to this, like almost at least once a week. I have to remind myself this because it's just such a great uh, reminder for any type of coach, which is the training you're going to do next week needs to be reflective of what you did the week before. Like full stop. So if the week before you were doing no double sessions, the next week you're not doing 5 double sessions. Like it needs to be progressive. So that's why people, like I said, they start at the end and they do add in 5 double sessions, even though they've never done double sessions, and it's too much. So you start slow, you start easy, and you build it up. So that would be the error most people make. And then how to remedy that.
So common mistake in terms of like an example, people are thinking, they're not thinking energy, whereas like I'm getting, I need to build a rhythm. They're thinking AM, I have an extra chance to get better. This person's low hanging fruit is muscle ups, and they're not going to be doing anything else around it when it's a muscle up session. Instead of thinking this person has never worked out twice a day yet. So they're looking immediately at what their issues are instead of looking at like, how do we build to improve overall?
Yes. Long-term versus short-term viewing. Because the implementation of a double session needs to be from the frame of reference of the long term. Like the goal is to build a lot of training volume so you can recover faster from intense efforts and make you better prepared for multi-day competitions in the future. That would be the long-term view for double sessions. So that needs to be slowly built up, which is using what we outlined. It's a very simple but effective way of doing that to ensure that those sessions complement everything else you're doing. And as you mentioned, not at the expense of wasting energy that a lot of people end up doing when they follow popular training blogs, programs. It's just too much. It's not reflective of what they've been doing, and they're wasting too much energy. They're not replenishing it, and they're just digging themselves a hole that leads to either burnout or some sort of injury.
Okay. And did you have a second point there, or so maybe how to remedy or how coaches can avoid, or an athlete, how can they avoid this?
Yeah, it's just starting with less, add 1 per week, do that for a few weeks, make it less volume, less intense, just build the rhythm and slowly kind of build that up. So that would be the remedy is start slow. And then I wrote down here, to give an example, I plugged in the example of if I was to add 3 sessions per week of double sessions. Let's say people have been doing 2 sessions per week. We want to go to 3 sessions per week. And over time, we want to take the 3 and we want to move it into 3 challenging sessions. We're first going to start with all 3 of them being easy. And then we'll progress to 2 being easy, 1 being tough. And then we'll progress to 1 being easy, 2 being tough. And then finally, we'll progress to 3 tough sessions. So there's a very simple progression of making the sessions easier and slowly ramping them up to where now you have like 3 challenging, mixed PM sessions that are separated by a day or 2. So and everything we're sharing here is like, it's very simple concepts and ideas, which is, it's just like you start with a little, and you maintain consistency and not at the expense of what really matters, which is getting stronger, more fit, better skills, better capacity. And you build and layer little by little until eventually you have second sessions like you do now, which are pretty robust and quite a bit of volume and challenging, but they're not at the expense of your other session.
Yeah. 10 years ago when I was doing double sessions, they were walks. They were like walks on uneven ground was kind of was my Wednesday sessions, which was like go on a hike. And I live around a lot of areas where I can go kind of hike in the woods or hike. It was walk. It was no elevation change really, but some uneven ground around the world, like you said. And, as I slowly got a bit better, more fit. It was then barely different. It was row easy for 5 minutes, hop off it was 45-minute session, and hop off, do 1 strict handstand push-up and do 5 ring rows, and then maybe like 5 step up, 5 per side step up, and then just back on the rower, and like, just going at an easy pace. And then it slowly progressed more and more and more to now where it's a lot more dynamic. And even other times of the year, it's not, some of the sessions still are easy, depending on the time of year. But it reminded me of something off topic, but on topic is, zone 2 is extremely popular, or has gotten it popular over the past year and a half. And part of the reason and why people may think it's working really well for them is they were doing really hard AM sessions or really hard PM sessions, vice versa. So let's just say in the AM they were doing, mixed effort training of like burpees, box jumps, power cleans, and rowing. And then they were trying to go doing a strength session and skill session or whatever they were doing in their PM. And now they're like, oh, I need to be doing zone 2. So now they're doing like 30 to 45 minutes easy on a C2, or, like a biker or a rower or a run. And they think, oh, like, well, now I'm getting way better. Where in turn, maybe it was just them taking a step back. Maybe the zone 2 isn't magic, which it isn't, but, maybe it was allowing them to recover a little bit better and removing training where they're thinking now they're doing the secret sauce, and now it's just letting them have a more beneficial second or first session, while another one is easier effort and it's way less stress on them.
Yeah. No, hit the nail on the head.
So yeah, zone 2 is good if it's used appropriately. Yeah, I thought we covered a lot. We got some good questions from some clients showing their support. One of each, maybe. So we got a tally. We're tied. But yeah, any closing thoughts? Any further words of advice for those out there looking to get into doubles?
I mean, we covered quite a bit. I would say, if you were to distill it down, think about trade-offs. If I want to expend more energy in the day, do I have the available resources to pull from? Am I willing to give myself more time to rest, give myself more time to eat? Like, what concessions am I willing to make in order to ensure that this is supporting my improvement? And then also making sure, whether it's your coach or if you write your own training, that the progression of the double session, the second session, is slow and progressive, and you can use the framework we outlined as a way of doing it, because that's like the easiest trap to fall in, is you turn it into something too challenging too quick, and now it starts to not benefit your adaptation and growth. So make it easier and simpler for longer before moving into more complex ideas.
Yep, makes sense. If you thought my parting words were going to be, if you think 2 sessions were going to make you better, think if you could squeeze in a third.
Yeah,
think 3 sessions is kind of is the next key, is what will really level you up. No, I think it sounds simple, and people will grasp it and say like, oh yeah, that's simple, like I understand that. They really don't understand what easy work is. And you just got to think, if you can, let's just say, add an hour of training to your day, could you still progress in the second session? Would you feel good? If you don't have a coach and you are wanting to try it, just try it. Ride a bike for 30 minutes in the morning, and then go back in the afternoon. And if you feel like you're suffering a lot, then it's probably like, I'm not ready. If you,
or it was too intense.
Or it's too, or you're doing too much, maybe adjust. So I think people just, like you said, there's a lot of trade-offs, and it's not always what people might think the trade-off would be. So, you just got to look at a big picture, plug and play, try it, or work with a coach. You're lucky enough, if you're listening so far, that we do that. So we could help you out with that. You could book a consult, you could chat about it, you could DM one of us, and we could give you some advice. And if you're looking for some professional coaching to level up your training, that could be a step. We also have programs built out to help you do that. If you guys have any questions, you can always post them. You can always send them to us. If you have any future topics you'd like us to discuss, we would like to unpack that for you. But overall, I think we covered this one pretty good. Just remember, 2 sessions does not always mean twice as much gains or twice as much progress. So I'm good to go if you are.
Yeah. Thank you, Roman.
No problem. Thanks for the time. Thanks for listening, everyone. Hope you enjoyed.